Hey folks, thanks for stopping by and welcome back to my YouTube channel Czechoslovak Gun Stories. My name is Kuba and in today's episode we're going to discuss another clever feature of the Czechoslovak firearms, and that's CZ75 trigger. Now, if you follow the history of firearms, you probably noticed that the history of semi-automatic pistols is somewhat similar to the history of revolvers. First, there were single action only pistols which had pretty nice, smooth, short, light trigger that was actually very helpful in terms of accuracy, but it was not all that practical for the safety, because carrying the gun cocked and locked is not actually the best idea out there. So similarly to revolvers, there were also attempts to create a double action pistol. The very first single action double action pistol was created before the World War I in 1909 by the Austro-Hungarian inventor and designer by Czech origin Alois Tomiška. His pistols in caliber 7.65 Browning and 6.35 Browning Little Tom were actually using this idea of having the single action trigger, which was rather crisp, and also a heavy, revolver-like double action trigger. Despite the very modern and progressive construction of Little Tom pistols, Alois Tomiška didn't attract all that much attention with his pistol, and unfortunately it took another 2 decades before another manufacturer, Walther, came up with another pistol which was using a single action double action trigger. Walther PP and its later iteration PPK were the very first commercially successful single action double action pistols, and even by today's standards they are quite modern and up to date, and I wouldn't afraid to carry them on everyday basis. Walther also later came up with another design that was a Walther P38. Once again, it was single action double action pistol in 9mm Luger this time for then Wehrmacht, and it also had decalker, so it was very modern pistol which served as a base for the later Beretta 92 and other pistols. So it turned out that the single action double action concept in pistol area is a very promising, very modern, very useful concept. With the success of Walther's designs, many other designers came with their own pistols that were based on the single action double action principle. However, many of those guns were actually based on Walther PP. You have the Soviet Makarov, you have the Hungarian FAK, AP and PA pistols, which are actually almost a direct copy of Walther's design. You have the Polish P64, you have the Czech CZ50, and all those designs were actually based on the Walther design heavily. Although they were improved somehow, yet they had all the same problems, slight problem that Walther had, and that was a very stiff and long double action pull. So the first pull was really hard, really stiff, and that was a problem for accuracy. I have my CZ50 here. As you can see, the weapon is clear, no round in the chamber. I'll put a snap cap in the magazine. If you don't know, by the way, if you don't know why, just check my previous video on the VZ15 and you'll understand why I use the snap cap to dry fire the CZ50. I'll decal the weapon and just show you how stiff and heavy the double action is. The single action is quite fine, right? It's nothing really all that complicated, but the double action is horrifying. Now, it's a good thing for safety. However, in 1970s, when this gun was being updated to CZ70, there was a designer, a very famous Czechoslovak designer, František Koucký, who was asked to evaluate the CZ50 and see if the double action trigger pull could be improved somehow, and he found out that it's actually not possible. This was actually when he probably realized that the double action trigger pull is very important for a service purposes for the policemen and soldiers that carry the gun, because if the first shot is inaccurate because of the stiff double action trigger, it can cause the soldier or policeman their life. So with his new design, which was the CZ75, a gun that was requested by the Czechoslovak authorities to be like an export article, a gun that would be exported outside the country for, especially to the Western countries. He focused on the double action trigger especially. Now, if you've ever shot CZ75 with double action trigger, you probably notice how smooth and light it is compared to other guns like the 50 or Walther PP, etc. Now, why is that? What's the black magic behind that? Let's have a look. So what František Koucký did to achieve such a smooth and light double action trigger pull? Well, he simplified the trigger bar, that's what. But how? Well, at that time, all double action trigger bars were based on the class 1 lever. Imagine it as a crowbar. You are trying to open a wooden box that is nailed very well. What do? You push down on the crowbar while you are trying to move the lid up. In the gun language, you pull the trigger one direction, but the trigger bar goes another direction with the hammer hooked, and it is pushed until the sear is released. Then the hammer slips and it hits the firing pin. So in other words, the forces go against each other. You pull backwards while the trigger bar travels forward. František Koucký decided to take another approach and used a class 2 lever. That means that the trigger is being pushed backwards and so is the trigger bar. So that's the difference. Again, at some point the sear is released and the hammer travels back against the firing pin, but the idea here is that both the trigger finger as well as the trigger bar, so the two forces, the resistance as well as the effort, are routed the same way, they go the same way, which allowed him to make the trigger pull much smoother, much lighter, yet very reliable, and based on that principle the CZ75 works until today. So guys, that's it for the CZ75 trigger system. If you enjoy shooting CZ75s like I do, and if you like the video, if you learned something new, please hit the subscribe button, like the video, and if you have any questions, remarks, anything, use the comment section down below, it's there for you. So, thank you, and until next time.